Just moments ago, the Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle resigned, but it doesn't end there. Donald Trump wants answers. He wants to declassify everything when he becomes president. We'll show you exactly what he and his running mate said about it. Also, we're told that Joe Biden called in for a proof of life session there at his campaign headquarters. But was that really Joe Biden? Was it a recording? What's going on here? Everything about this is weird. And it's pretty creepy, actually, because we've learned now from the New York Post that he was threatened by his own party that they would forcibly remove him from office. No one's talking about this amazing breakdown the New York Post has done. We're going to talk about it, and we'll break it down for you. And finally, we might criticize Kamala Harris. And I want to warn you, because I'm told that if you criticize Kamala Harris, if you make fun of her and her laugh and her political origin story and what she did to sort of rise to the top, you're sexist. And, well, we're going to go there. So you have fair warning. Buckle up. Get ready. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Thanks for watching on our all-encompassing, just scatter fire live stream across all platforms today. We are on Rumble, we're on YouTube, we're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on the moon, over the moon, frankly, with our excitement that you're here joining us. And if you're watching us after the fact, as so many of you do, thank you so much for doing that. If you can carve out time in your midday, join us at noon live so you can interact with all of our live viewers. But if not, if you are watching these segments afterwards, please subscribe and like this and follow this or whatever you're watching it. Just use the mechanism on that social media streaming account so that you can send the love. That's all we ask. No money, just love. But you can send money if you want. Yesterday, Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance appeared on Fox News Channel with Jesse Waters. And much of the conversation, obviously, naturally, revolved around the recent assassination attempt on President Trump's life. In fact, why isn't that still the number one most important story anyone is following right now? That's kind of weird, isn't it? Anyway, here's Donald Trump talking about some of the issues that he still is grappling with, having to do with the lack of full Secret Service protection that he should have had.
Screw ups sometimes happen, even very big screw ups, but it's the responsibility of leaders to stand before the country and say, all right, we screwed up. We're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to answer questions and do it in public. I think that the fact that there's been no transparency here is what makes a lot of us say, well, what the hell happened and why, are we actually taking steps to ensure it doesn't happen again?
If you're elected, you can declassify the assassination attempt files. You could clear things up like that. You'll do that, right?
I would, yeah, sure. I mean, there should be nothing to hide here.
It's his decision.
I think, frankly, but I think, frankly, many things are known right now. But some of the things that are known are bad. How did somebody get on that roof, and why wasn't he reported? Because people saw that he was on the roof. I mean, you had Trumpers screaming. The woman in the red shirt, she was screaming, "There's a man on the roof!" And then other people said, "There's a man on the roof who's got a gun," and that was quite a bit before I walked onto the stage. So you would have thought somebody would have done something about it.
Yeah, you would think. And this is the whole promise to declassify things, as you just heard from President Trump there. There's no reason why it should be declassified. But let's face it, we're what, 61 years after the Kennedy assassination in Dallas, and they still haven't fully declassified everything there? I mean, who exactly are they protecting at this point? Actually, I didn't mean that as some sort of rhetorical question. Seriously, who are they protecting at this point? 61 years later. So maybe we could roll out and declassify all the Secret Service data and FBI data and CIA data and any other alphabet soup agency involved in both of these extraordinary moments in American history. I'll believe it when I see it. But that last question there is something that still remains unanswered, even after hours and hours of testimony yesterday from the Secret Service director, who's just recently resigned her position earlier today. But that doesn't mean she's out of the woods, I assure you. One question has to be answered. Police officers were notified, and they physically saw a man crawling in a sniper position with a long gun on a roof at a sniper shot position with a direct line of fire to President Trump's speaking position before President Trump came out at that rally. At that moment, when police officers radioed, and we know they don't sit on the same encrypted frequencies as Secret Service, but there is supposed to be a communications relay at their command center where local authorities hear something like that from a cop and they directly tell the Secret Service, and they still haven't answered what went wrong there. That's one of the first and only questions that should be answered right now, and they're claiming 10 days later that they still don't have that answer. I'm not the kind of guy that jumps onto a conspiracy theory. But unless you're transparent and open with a basic fundamental data point like that, 10 days later, if you can't reveal that answer, it sure looks like you're covering something up. And then one must ask, what are you covering up? There's only two answers. You're either covering up your incompetency, that you didn't actually have local law enforcement in the command center with Secret Service to be able to trade communications back and forth. So you're covering that incompetency up, or you're covering up the fact that you did know about it and did nothing. Either way, we, the American people, deserve to know. That's why we pay for the Secret Service. We do pay for them. It's our money. That's why we deserve to know what you're doing with it, especially when you're screwing up on the one job you've got. All right, a little bit more here from this extraordinary exchange last night about the questions that Donald Trump, the man who took a bullet in the ear because of this behavior, the questions he still got.
Mistakes were made. They were monitoring this guy for an hour beforehand.
Yeah.
No one told you not to take the stage?
No, nobody mentioned it. Nobody said there was a problem. And I would have waited for 15. They could have said, let's wait for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, something. Nobody said, I think that was a mistake. The Secret Service, they call them snipers, but he was, world-class shot. I guess he didn't want to take the shot. I can understand that one a little bit because maybe he didn't see, maybe he doesn't know. You don't want to shoot somebody if the person's not going to be carrying a gun. I don't know if they had a gun. They had a policeman that actually saw the man with a gun, and you would have thought that that would have been conveyed to other people. So there were some mistakes. But I can tell you this, just to go on the more positive side, the people on the stage were unbelievable and brave. They were all Secret Service that came running up, and they were running past bullets. Bullets were, when I went down, bullets were coming over my head, and you hear them. It's like a zip, zip. So I'm lucky I went down fast, but I don't even consider that the lucky part. I consider the lucky part turning exactly right in the one position where, you're going to get hit here, but you're not going to get hit in the wrong location, which is, what that is.
Yeah, I'll say it is. And yeah, that's lucky. Lucky is one word for it. But again, the questions. And it's interesting that Jesse Waters began that exchange there with mistakes were made. Yeah, that's a pretty generous description of what's going on. But here's the problem. We have no evidence right now to say one way or the other whether these were mistakes or whether they were deliberate. I'm not saying they're one or the other, but it's irresponsible to just decide it is one or the other. If these were mistakes, then yesterday would have been a great opportunity for the Secret Service director, Kim Cheadle, to say these were mistakes. This is what we should have done. This is what we did instead. This is why we did it instead. And that's how the mistakes were made. But she didn't provide that. And when you don't provide it, 10 days after the fact, on basic fundamental questions about what went wrong, then you'll forgive us for leaving all options open and on the table. In fact, it would be irresponsible to not leave all options open and on the table. I personally don't want to wait 40 years for Oliver Stone to make a movie about this. Do you?
Senator, the FBI is doing an investigation on the assassination attempt. Do you trust the Bureau?
I don't trust the Bureau leadership, but I certainly think there are a lot of good field agents, guys on the grounds who have the country's best interest at heart. I think, like the president, obviously he was there and I wasn't, but my initial reaction was exactly the same. What bravery from the guys who reacted immediately. But what the hell was going on? How was that guy ever allowed to be there in the first place? Which I think somebody, whether it's higher up or somebody else involved, really did screw up. And we have to get to the bottom of it because, now me and my family are under protection. And obviously the president's safety is of paramount importance. I mean, people realize whether you're Democrat or Republican, what an unbelievable, bullet that we all dodged, right? Of course, the president's life is the most important thing. The unrest in this country, the anger, it would have taken this country a half a century to get over it. And, we really did, I think, as a country, get really lucky, not just the president.
I know many people in the FBI, they're great. They tend to be at the mid and lower levels. They're unbelievable. And they're MAGA. Believe me, they're MAGA. They make America great again, people. But, there's some things going on with our government that we have to really worry about. Did we have enough people? Why didn't we have enough people? Somebody said that a lot of people were put on Biden's detail. The problem is Biden doesn't draw anybody. He draws flies. He draws nobody. And, you don't need very many people for that because he does not draw. He'll have 30 people show up, and we have 55, 60,000 people show up. And so you have to take care of those big crowds.
Secret Service detail of 20, you can have a 1-to-1 ratio at a Biden rally, right? The president actually needs substantial protection. So I 100% believe that some people got to be investigated and probably some people need to be fired.
Senator,
of course, this was recorded last night, and the developing story here is that as of this morning, just about an hour before we started this stream, Kimberly Chittle did step down. She resigned. Nobody gets fired, though. It's amazing. Well, what exactly does it take to get fired in the Biden administration? The Afghanistan pull-up, nobody gets fired. The inflation, the economy, nobody gets fired. The constant train derailments and chemical spills, nobody gets fired. The border, nobody gets fired. Crime, nobody gets fired. It's discovered that the FBI is investigating men who go to traditional Latin mass and going after parents who go to school board meetings, nobody gets fired. Fauci and the masks and the vaccines and the mandates and the Wuhan lab leak, nobody gets fired. And now this, nobody gets fired. It's funny. It seems as though the only person, the only incompetent, the only complete bumbling dolt from the Biden administration who has finally been fired is Joe Biden. Yeah, Kimberly Chittle has stepped down. But Donald Trump still has a lot of questions about this would-be assassin, and he wants answers to all of them. He lays it out here in this segment.
are you at all suspicious he had help?
Well, you just don't know. It doesn't look like it, does it? But now we're finding out that he had some encrypted phone numbers and to foreign countries, which a little bit surprises me. When you look at him, he was somebody that was bullied in school, and you hear all different stories. I would say probably he was a loner, but you don't know that. They have to check out the phone numbers. They have to check out the phone. I think they were able to break into his phone. I would hope so. For a crime like this, you have to be able to break into a phone, because they pride themselves on not allowing people to break in, and government can't get in. Apple can let you in. So I don't know exactly what happened, but assassination is big stuff, and you have to get to it. So we'll see what happens. But it just shouldn't have been when you have essentially a flat, open roof like that, and it's direct to the target with absolutely nothing in its way. How can somebody be up there? And he was up there for a long period of time because they have tape of him moving all over the place. And then they see him and they don't report him. Who was the policeman, or I guess it was local police, who looked at him, saw him standing with a gun? I think the guy saw him, and this guy dropped off the roof. And I don't blame him for that. What I do blame him for is why isn't he calling everybody, screaming and say, there's a guy with a gun up there? What did he do when he dropped off the roof? Did he just go away and say, like, nothing? That's a big, that's a big factor. Who was he? And why did he do that? Why didn't we know about that? Because I would have, oftentimes based on weather and based on other things, they'd say, sir, would you wait 10 minutes before you go out, please? We never had a case like this. But certainly if they said, would you wait 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes because we have a possible problem, unlikely but possible. I wish somebody would have done that because Corey would be alive and 2 people that were seriously hurt would not be hurt.
That's right. Listen, President Trump is asking all the right questions. He demands answers. They're not going to be forthcoming. And quite frankly, quite possibly, only his election actually bring those answers to the table. But at least he's asking the same questions we're all asking. And once he gets into the White House, he can actually act on behalf of the American people and get to those answers. And it's not just about President Trump. It's about what the Secret Service is supposed to do. The question to J.D. Vance earlier from Jesse Waters is, do you trust the FBI to conduct this investigation? And they say, yeah, listen, the guys on the ground are great. They're MAGA. We've met them. They love this country. They're patriots. It's the leadership that we have issues with and worry about. And, you hear from all these intellectual, ethical and moral superiors of us conservatives, us, rabble down here, the hoi polloi. They tell us all the time that you must trust our institutions, trust the credentialed class, trust the experts. Well, let me rattle them off again, from the DOJ to the FBI to the CIA to the NIH to the HHS to the USSS to whatever other alphabet soup agency you want to put out there that's responsible for protecting our borders, keeping our streets safe, utilizing the law to go after actual criminals and not using the law as a political weapon against your political opponents. They have failed at every turn. These institutions that, yes, at one point had a pristine reputation, and we did have faith that they had the best interest of our Constitution and the American people at heart, they have allowed themselves to be tarnished and warped and distorted and twisted into nothing more than political weapons for the deep state, for the bureaucracy, for the infrastructure. This is not about institutions. Forgive us for not trusting the institutions, but they haven't done much to earn our trust. And when all is said and done, when people are elected into office, they raise their right hand, they put their hand on their holy book, and they swear to protect and defend the Constitution, not the institutions. And that's what we need right now more than ever. The Constitution getting elevated up over these rotting institutions. One other observation quickly in this interview. Do you notice how much more comfortable, at ease Donald Trump seems on camera with J.D. Vance? Their body language, the way they interact, the conversation. I think he and Pence figured things out and they had a working relationship for a while there in the White House, but they were always very different types of people with very different worldviews and perspectives and approaches. I think that's clear. These two, at least from Trump's perspective, he seems very at ease. He seems very comfortable with his new running mate. It'll be interesting to watch their relationship develop over the next few months and hopefully over the next few years. We've all been waiting for a proof of life moment of Joe Biden. It's been almost a week now since we last saw him. He was scheduled to do that fundraiser in Nevada, and at the last minute, with the crowd gathered in the room, they canceled. They said he had COVID. There are a lot of strange reports coming out of Las Vegas with the Metro Police saying that they were alerted that there was a medical emergency and Biden had to get to the hospital. Then they called that off and said, no, we're going to go to the airport. We'll go to Johns Hopkins, which is a hospital near Baltimore. And then they just decided to fly on to Delaware so he can recover at home from COVID. And then since then, we have not heard from him at all, other than that moment he stumbled down the stairs of Air Force One, the short stairs. He could barely make down, and he could literally not get into a car. He needed a person's assistance to lift his legs into the waiting SUV. Since then, the only thing we've heard from Joe Biden is this letter we're told he wrote and put out announcing that he would no longer seek the presidency, and then that he was endorsing Kamala Harris. this is weird. Things like this don't happen, not in this fashion. At the very least, you would think in that letter, Joe Biden would have said why he's deciding not to run for 4 more years, but he didn't say that. He just said that it's in the best interest of the party and then the country. At the very least, you'd think you'd see a still photograph, a picture of Joe Biden. Lord knows we see plenty of pictures of him when he's in his Delaware home, but no, there are no photographs at all. We also had that strange report of his brother, Frank Biden, saying that now that he's out of the race, they'll be able to spend what little time they have left together. And that, of course, was quickly disavowed. The questions stack up on top of each other. None of this is normal. And we, the American people, deserve to have a functioning president of the United States. We got a letter yesterday from his physician, Kevin O'Connor, who's frankly lost all credibility given the lies that he's partaken in over the last 3.5 years. The letter says that he's recovering nicely from COVID and he's performing all of his functions as president. But we know for a fact that he isn't performing all of his functions as president. So what's going on here? Well, yesterday, Kamala Harris, who inherited a complete and total campaign apparatus from Joe Biden, visited her brand new campaign headquarters in Delaware. It's amazing if you think about it. Just like the beginning of her political career, she's gotten a huge boost, a huge leg up from a man 30 years older than her. This much older man has given her everything she needs that she didn't really have to work for. I mean, that we know of. Anyway, at that visit at the campaign headquarters, we're told that Joe Biden addressed his campaign manager and the staff via telephone. I say we're told that because I can't verify that this is Joe Biden calling in live to his headquarters. We'll listen to it together, but then we've got questions. Here's the beginning.
I know yesterday's news was surprising and it was hard for you to hear, but it was the right thing to do. I know it's hard because you poured your heart and soul into me to help us win this thing, help me get this nomination, help me win the nomination, and then go on to win the presidency. But you know, you're an amazing team, but we've got a great, I think we made the right decision.
All right. So first of all, we noticed that the president is noticeably slurring his speech big time. Now, that could be due to medication, I suppose. It could be due to some kind of physical side effect to the COVID, I suppose, or perhaps something else that they're not telling us he's suffering from. But there's definitely a slur in his speech, much more noticeable than the typical slurring of his speech that we've grown accustomed to over the last 4+ years. Also, because this is a telephone call, I think it's fair to assume that he's reading this statement and reading what he's saying to the campaign headquarters, or maybe this is just actually pre-recorded and has been edited together and they're just pretending that it's live. More on that in a moment, but let's jump to another part of this address to his campaign staff.
Julie, if I didn't have COVID, I'd be sitting there with you, standing there with you. I'm so proud of what you've all done. And but this COVID has keep me out of people's hair for the next 3 or 4 days.
Let me pause there for a minute. It is interesting. You know, having COVID is the perfect excuse for having to isolate oneself, right? But here's the thing. This president has had COVID before, and he hasn't been this kind of isolated. We've still seen him. There's still been picture or video of him, number one. Number two, we've all had COVID. So we know what it's like. And we know that if you're well enough to make a phone call, you should be well enough to make a Zoom call or any other kind of video address. I mean, this is the president of the United States, and they've got millions and millions and millions of dollars in their campaign coffers. Why couldn't they just set up a television there so we could see the man? But clearly, they are going out of their way deliberately to not let Joe Biden be seen, which raises questions, plenty of questions. Listen to him slur a little bit here, and I will show you my evidence that he's actually reading these remarks instead of actually speaking like a normal human being off the top of his head. Be clear here. Joe Biden, they've decided, is incapable of just having a natural conversation with his campaign staff to wish them well and explain why he did what he did, even though he never really explained why he did what he did. No, they can't let him naturally have a conversation. They had to write this out, and I'll prove it to you. I'll prove what he's saying here is written out in just a moment. Listen.
But I'm going to be on the road, and I'm not going anywhere. It's kept me away a little bit, but I want people to remember that what we have done has been incredible, and we get so much more we're going to get done.
Yeah, the narrative of what they've done is so incredible is really starting to build here. You hear everybody saying it, what objectively speaking is the greatest presidency in American history. We'll break that apart in just a moment. But here's one of the smoking guns I've got as to the fact that this is a written statement that Joe Biden is reading, that this was all like sort of scripted out for him. Watch this.
And by the way, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be out there in the campaign with her, with Kamala. I'm going to be working like hell, both as a sitting president, getting legislation passed, as well as in campaigning. What we still need to save this democracy. And Trump is still a danger to the community, is a danger to the nation.
Did you catch that? Trump is a danger to the community. That makes no sense at all. Why would you ever refer to Donald Trump if you really do think that Donald Trump is a danger? And this is in the context of saving our democracy. You would not then compare him to, a shoplifter or somebody going 50 in a 25-mile zone in downtown near a school. That would be a danger to the community. The script that he had said he's a danger to the country. But of course, he has trouble reading things too. We've seen that over and over and over again. Now, usually when he's delivering remarks and he's reading from a teleprompter and he starts to read the wrong words, he just stops, freezes himself and says, anyway. Or he says, I better not even talk about that because I'll get into trouble. Or some stupid sort of bailout that he's tried to do over the years. But here, he doesn't. He's got his script and he calls Donald Trump a danger to the community.
This democracy. And Trump is still a danger to the community, is a danger to the nation.
Then he says a danger to the nation. That makes no sense. Why has he ever been described by Joe Biden in the past as a danger to the community? What community? To the neighborhood where he's sitting in Delaware, to the neighborhood around the White House? Community is nonsensical. And that's not a slip of the tongue. Why would you say community when you mean country unless you're reading the word country, but you misread it because your eyes aren't working, because you're just that debilitated from whatever medical condition he's got that they're not telling us about. Does this sound like COVID to you? You've had it. Did it make you slur your speech like this?
What we still need to save this democracy. And Trump is still a danger to the community, is a danger to the nation.
Listen, I could be wrong. This is the problem with the lack of transparency, with the lack of actual proof that the man is alive, with all of the lies. Forgive me for not believing what they're saying right now about Joe Biden, but we know for a fact that all of them at the White House, in Congress, in the family, and in the media have been lying about his health this entire time. We know it now. Now they're starting to, we saw this a couple of years ago, but nobody said anything. Well, we saw this. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about a meeting, the only meeting or last meeting that Joe Biden had with the Democrat caucus in the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill in 2021, where he was incoherent. And everybody knew then. But what if we heard, he's at the top of his game. He's sharp as a tack. He's never been more brilliant. He's never been more capable. So forgive me for not believing that this is Joe Biden suffering from COVID calling into his campaign headquarters. I don't even know if it's Joe Biden. I don't think he's suffering from COVID. I think he's suffering from something worse. And I don't know if that's him calling in live. I think it's something recorded that they're playing to make you think that he's calling in live. And guess what? I've been given no evidence to suggest otherwise, other than believe us, trust us. We're telling you the truth. The same people who have lied this entire time. Why do I think that it's recorded instead of live? Well, if you haven't seen it yet, here's Kamala Harris jumping up there to interact with old Joe.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do. Everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
Boy, is she charming. She's just so charming. Really, gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling. Everything about her is so genuine. In fact, she's so genuine that she almost gave away the story. Did you hear what she had to say there when she said, Joe, I think you're still on the call? But right before she said, I think you're on the call, she said something else.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call.
Hear that? It sounds like she's about to say a word that begins with R-E, maybe even a C there, and then she stops herself, like recording. I know you're still on the recording. Just think of that in your head right now. Think, Joe, I know you're still on the recording. And then listen to what she said.
So good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call.
What word could she possibly have been saying instead of call? What did she correct there? What was she about to say?
President's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call.
I know you're still on the recliner with your feet up, relaxing with COVID. That's what she was saying. Yeah, Joe, I know you're still on the recliner. Of course, this whole thing is being sponsored by Lazy Boy. Now it makes sense. She not at all was about to say, I know you're still on the recording.
Hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call. And
I trust her. Why shouldn't we trust her? I mean, just a week before the debate, she said that the president was as sharp as a tack. The best he's ever been, right? So, I mean, we saw just how great he was. She then went on to try to paint this picture of what a great president he is.
Joe, are you watching? You hear this clapping? Can you see it?
I'm watching. I'm watching.
I knew it.
Oh, yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. But this is one of the things anyone says, oh, obviously it was live because look at that interaction. No, that's something that can be pre-scripted and prearranged. Kamala, just go out there and get everybody clapping and then ask Joe if he's watching because we've got him saying I'm watching. That's not proof that this thing was live. It may be. Here's the thing. If it is, why are they acting so weird? Why is everything about this so weird? And since they've lied up until this point, why should we not assume they continue to lie? Okay, here's Kamala extolling the virtues of what a great president Joe Biden is. In fact, wait, no, not a great president. The greatest president ever.
So now I'm getting back to you, Joe. I will tell you all, it has been one of the greatest honors of my life, truly, to serve as vice president to our president, Joe Biden. Joe's legacy of accomplishment, just over a lifetime, but just over the last 3.5 years, is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who served 2 terms in office.
I am so excited that this is going to be what they're running on. That she's going to run on the legacy of achievement of Joe Biden. Go for it, honey. First of all, if I may, if you're Bill Clinton or you're Barack Obama or you're a Democrat and you worked in those administrations and you have this cackling moron stepping up and saying that he has done more in just 1 term than any other president has done in 2 terms. And you're Clinton and Obama, and you're like, wait a second, we had 2 terms. Are you telling me that he's done more than we did? I mean, right there, it's insulting to them. And of course, it's insulting to your intelligence. But if this is what they're running on their record of success about how great, you may be feeling pain right now with prices and inflation and crime and national security debacles and the border security. And but no. You're wrong. What you don't get, what you're too stupid to understand, is that this is the greatest presidency in American history. I think that's a real winning message, especially since, as Peter Hassan, the editor of Free Beacon, pointed out, this is the latest approval-disapproval rating for Joe Biden, and it tracks from January 2021 there when he took office. The red line is disapproval. He came in with 30% disapproval. He came in with 55% approval. And only about halfway through his first year in office, those lines crossed, and they have never gone back. As of this moment in his presidency, he has a 56.2% disapproval rating and a 38% approval rating. And that 38% approval rating, I think, is because he just dropped out of the race. And so people approve of that. It's actually a little worse than that in reality. That kind of approval rating does not coincide with the greatest presidency of modern American history, unless your perspective is that the American people who are reflected in that poll are too stupid to get it. So pick your poison, Kamala Harris. This is your campaign now. You let us know what you're going to be running on. Things are super duper great, couldn't be better, record of achievement, and anyone who disagrees is just a moron. I like that campaign messaging. I like the odds that Trump and his team have against it. A very, very underreported story is going on beneath the surface here over the events of the last several days, when that letter was put out by Joe Biden saying that he was removing himself from contention for the Democratic nomination at the convention next month. It appears as though, according to reports from the New York Post, and it's a very credible report, and we're going to go through it in detail, it appears as though the Democrat hierarchy pushed him out, threatened him to pull the 25th Amendment on him and physically remove him from the White House if he did not knuckle under to their demands. This would all make sense, actually. That inexplicable announcement on Sunday, if in fact it was voluntary from Joe Biden, it came just days after he publicly said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing what these elites say. I'm the one who can beat Trump. I got 14 million votes, and they're not pushing me out. And then without any further discussion, boom, he's gone. How did all this transpire? Well, let's turn to the New York Post together, shall we? The headline: top Dems threaten to forcibly remove Biden from office unless he dropped out, set him up to fail at Trump debate, according to sources. Isabel Vincent reporting on this, and the story hit late yesterday afternoon. Now, let's go through this together. Operatives at the very highest levels of the Democratic Party, and let's just be clear what that means. The very highest levels means that you can't get higher. So that means the chairman of the DNC, it means the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, it means Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries in the House, it means Barack Obama, it means Kamala Harris. That's the highest levels of power at the Democratic Party. Operatives at the very highest levels of the Democratic Party threatened Joe Biden with forcibly removing him from office unless he stepped down, sources told the Post. The well-orchestrated palace coup to stop the faltering president seeking re-election has been in place for weeks, but stubborn Biden fought against it every step of the way, a source close to the Biden family told the Post Monday. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, it's anonymous sources, people talking off the record, and, these are the kind of stories that they try to, destroy Trump with, and unless people go on the record, we're not going to take the story. Well, first of all, who would go on the record with a story like this, number one? And number two, of all the publications out there that have news reports, investigative pieces like this, that are sourced from anonymous sources, wouldn't you, on the face of it, lend some credibility to the New York Post? The New York Post, who had the Hunter Biden story, who stood by their reporting on the Hunter Biden story, who anonymous sources have been right every step of the way. This isn't like the Washington Post or the New York Times or CNN, where their anonymous sources are clearly just using those publications as political weapons against conservatives and Republicans. No, this is the New York Post, who is actually engaged in real life journalism, who people like CNN and Washington Post and New York Times hate, which basically, frankly, to me, lends more credibility to this investigation. Also, what's in it for anybody to leak this information to the New York Post? I mean, what are they gaining from this? It doesn't help Kamala Harris, certainly. It doesn't. I mean, that also who benefits from this? This doesn't help Trump, really. It makes Biden look like a sympathetic figure. It makes the top Democrats look hypocritical, but it's not going to keep anybody from voting for them. So that makes me believe this story, because nobody benefits from this other than you and I getting the truth. All right, let's get back to it. The insider also made clear the anger, paranoia, and frustration Biden displayed as the party elites circled around him and piled on the pressure. And well, we saw that firsthand, didn't we? Part of the elaborate strategy to remove Biden from the race, as he announced in a shock letter posted on X Sunday, was allowing him to debate Republican candidate Donald Trump last month on live TV in Atlanta. During the car crash 90-minute debate, Biden appeared confused, slack-jawed, and at one point he froze up, with his shocking performance turning the tide against him. Listen, we speculated about this when Biden inexplicably made this debate challenge to Trump months ago. Why on earth would they say, let's debate in June? Presidential debates are never held in June. Why would they do it before the convention, before the nominating process? And if you remember watching this program, I told you why. Because they were trying to prove before the convention that they were just fine. They were okay. And the party elders agreed to this so that if it was a disaster, they'd be able to maneuver. The only thing that screwed up their plan was that he refused to go. They thought he'd be reasonable, but they didn't count on Jill and Hunter taking command. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this is the only logical explanation. It is a complete and total malpractice politically to agree to a debate, especially when you're the incumbent. Why would you agree to a debate this early on in the process? You wait. The last election in 2020, they waited until early voting was already going on. And they even canceled one of the debates, remember? So this makes sense. See, listen, all these anonymous sourced articles that we live with, sadly, in Washington, D.C., here in this decrepit town, you should take them with a grain of salt. And sadly, it's up to you to pick and choose which ones make sense to you and which ones you think are true. To me, one of my rules of thumbs is that if it fits facts on the ground and actually makes logical sense, then you should take the story seriously. And this makes logical sense. It's the only explanation. Why in the hell else would they do a debate this early? It was part of the setup. All right. More on this article. Scrolling. That debate was a setup to convince Democrats that he couldn't run for president, the source said on Monday. As calls for him to bow out mounted, Biden insisted he could continue, but party bigwigs threatened to invoke the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The amendment allows for the vice president and members of the cabinet to declare he is unfit to serve and force him to step down, the source added. The White House and representatives from the Democratic National Committee did not immediately respond to the Post request for comment. More. Although Biden immediately endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate for president, the source said Democratic delegates will be strongly encouraged to instead back Arizona Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly for president at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August. Now, one update here, because this was printed around 3:30 yesterday afternoon. Since then, in the evening, the Kamala Harris people declared that they have, in fact, secured enough delegates to win on the first ballot in Chicago, which is, well, we'll see it when we believe it, or we'll believe it when we see it. But that's what they're claiming. So they're trying to preempt an attempt like this from someone else, which is actually kind of fascinating if you think about it, because everybody after the fact said, well, we're going to have a very open process, a very open process. We'll have an open process where if anyone else wants to challenge, they can certainly put their hat under the wing. We're going to have an open process to determine who the nominee is. And here we are, the announcement is Sunday. And by Monday evening, Kamala Harris says, that's it. It's over. The open process is complete. That was it. That's our 24-hour open process. And now it's locked down. And a woman who has never actually gotten a vote of any Democrat nationwide to be on a national ticket is going to be the nominee for president. A woman who was a senator from California for 4 years? And let's not make a mistake here. Kamala Harris is very much the embodiment of California Democrat policies and everything that goes along with it. She's now your nominee for the presidency without ever actually having to do anything to get it. I mean, other than, whatever it is she did to get ahead in politics, but we'll get to that a little later. Okay, so that's your open process. Now, what's interesting is Mark Kelly is being rumored as on the short list for running mate. So maybe that's the trade-off that was made. Let's continue with the article. Some holdouts have still yet to endorse Harris as Biden's successor, despite less than a month until the convention, only 4 months until Election Day. Most notable among them is former President Barack Obama. By the way, I don't think that's very notable. This is typical Obama. He keeps his fingerprints off everything. He doesn't have to publicly endorse Kamala Harris, especially in a process like this, because his public endorsement is meant to persuade the people. Well, the people are irrelevant in this entire process. He doesn't have to publicly endorse Kamala Harris. All he has to do is make 1 or 2 phone calls to well-placed Democrat leaders who communicate with the delegates, and it's over. So I don't find that notable. It's typical Barack Obama. Yeah, I had no idea that you couldn't keep your doctor if you like your doctor. That's Obama. Quote, we will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, Obama said on Sunday. Following the debate, the first son, Hunter Biden, suddenly became more involved in his father's day-to-day business and insisted upon attending every official and unofficial meeting, the source said. Hunter felt he, Joe Biden, was being set up, and he was very concerned about his father, the source said. These people, these officials, were not on Joe's side. See, that's what they weren't counting on. They weren't counting on the audacious nature of the Biden family. The last thing they expected was Hunter getting himself involved. Hunter, the whoremongering crack addict who just got convicted on felony gun charges, then actually being so shameless that he would inject himself into White House staff meetings to make sure that his dad is protected. But never underestimate the ability of a member of the Biden family to be brazenly corrupt and shameless. So that's a big mistake these party operatives made. Biden's own staff did not have any forewarning about the bombshell decision to pull out of the race, which was known since at least Tuesday of last week, the source said. Many were also shocked by the letter posted to Biden's X account itself, as it was typed on his private letterhead rather than the White House notepaper and signed electronically, the source said. Everyone was totally shocked, the source said. It was pretty telling that Jill Biden tweeted a heart emoji and nothing else. Democratic Party insiders have also known for at least 2 years how Biden was in decline, said the source. When I saw him a couple of years ago, it was frightening, said the source. He was just repeating slogans and had no idea who I was. So there it is from the New York Post. Have you heard anyone else reporting on this? I mean, this seems like a pretty big deal. It seems like it's well sourced. It seems like it's very well laid out and fact checked and researched. And it's just sitting there. It's just sitting there on the New York Post, gathering dust. I think it's noteworthy. And I'm glad I was able to share it with you. Now you know too. All right. The Trump campaign wasted no time going after their new opponent in the presidential election. Take a look at this very first ad that dropped going after the prospect of Kamala Harris being president of the United States.
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Our president is in good shape, in good health, tireless, vibrant, and I have no doubt about the strength of the work that we have done.
But Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Now, that's a great ad, and it serves many purposes. First, it serves to remind everybody how bad the Biden presidency was, and it also preempts any attempt for Kamala Harris to separate herself from the debacle that was the Biden presidency. It's funny, I saw Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper was reacting to this ad yesterday. In fact, you know what? I want to show it to you. It's just too good. I'm sorry, Kevin. I didn't have this prepped, but I do have it at my disposal. Jake Tapper reacted to this ad in the most hilarious way, and you've got to see it because they're already doing whatever they can to run interference for Kamala Harris. They are already jumping right back into their favorite and most comfortable zone, which is we've got to protect the Democrat and we've got to stop Trump. You know, for what? A beautiful 2.5 weeks, it looked as though they had learned a lesson and that they were going to hold the Democrats and the Biden White House to some level of scrutiny, to some level of accountability after being lied to. But nope, they're right back where they belong. Take a look at this reaction from Jake the Fake Tapper.
Kristen, we saw the MAGA team launch their first attack ad against Vice President Harris. Here's a clip.
Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record.
So it's interesting because they're kind of suggesting that she was like some sort of puppet master.
I love his incredulity. They're suggesting that she was in some way responsible for the policies of the administration. It's like, well, first of all, we know that Biden certainly wasn't running things very much, but the tone, the incredulity. Why? But this doesn't make any sense. She was and now watch this analyst here give this brilliant retort.
Yeah, I think that this is their attempt, as I said earlier, to try to link her to the Biden administration and say those policies are actually her policies.
This is their attempt to link her to the Biden administration. Can I just remind you of something? For as long as I've been politically aware in my young life, and I am a very young man, it was called the Reagan administration. When I was aware of President Reagan, it was called the Bush administration when George Bush was president. It was called the Clinton administration when Bill Clinton was president. It was called the Bush administration when George W. Bush was president. It was called the Obama administration when Barack Obama was president. And it was called the Trump administration when Donald Trump was president. It wasn't until Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came into office that the White House did this. Remember this? They made a very big deal out of this. Jen Psaki, on her press briefings every day, kept referring to it as the Biden-Harris administration, the Biden-Harris administration. The letterhead all said the Biden-Harris administration. The inauguration parties were all about the Biden-Harris inaugural. It's still there on the website. If you go to whitehouse.gov, that's where I got this yesterday. I screenshotted it, wh.gov. They're still calling it the Biden-Harris administration. They went out of their way. They did. They connected Kamala Harris to everything that comes out of this presidency.
Well, she's the vice president.
Right,
Fair.
which it's not.
And now she's
So it's interesting because they're kind of suggesting that she was like some sort of puppet master.
Yeah, I think that this is their attempt, as I said earlier, to try to link her to the Biden administration and say,
Oh, Kristen Holmes, national correspondent from CNN. This is how bad it is for them. And this is how stupid they're going to be, trying to run cover and do damage control and try to elevate this woman. Remember how they lifted Joe out of the basement and lied about him to drag him across the finish line? You ain't seen nothing yet what they're going to try to do for Kamala Harris. One other ad from the Trump people, which is very, very effective. Take a watch with me, will you?
If you thought Joe Biden was radical, just wait until you get to know Kamala Harris. She's dangerously liberal.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. You know, for far too long, the status quo thinking has been to believe that by putting more police on the street, you're going to have more safety. And that's just wrong.
You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
Abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Is that a position that you agree with?
Listen, I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE, and we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's new darling of the party. She 60 Minutes this weekend proudly calling herself a radical, and she's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No, I think that's fantastic.
By the way, I do wonder how Meghan McCain feels about having, which was a great moment on The View. Meghan laid out a great question for Kamala, and that's a devastating moment for Kamala Harris. I wonder how Meghan McCain feels about being used in an ad for Donald Trump. She's not a huge fan. That's a great ad, and it emphasizes something very, very important. Kamala Harris has now sort of inherited a national campaign without actually having to win in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina or anywhere. She was incapable of doing that 4 years ago. She dropped out of the race at 1%, even though she had more money raised than I think any candidate going in, maybe Beto O'Rourke, who was an equal disaster. Kamala Harris dropped out before she faced the voters because it was just that bad. Democrat voters rejected her. Why? Because 4 years ago, she was a California liberal. Most American voters during a primary process, especially even Democrats, are loath to vote for a California liberal Democrat. Why? Because we see with our own eyes what's happening in California. And this is who she is. She elevates all of those policies that have destroyed what was once the most beautiful, prosperous state in our country to the crap hole that it is right now. You ask Kamala Harris what she did about homelessness. She can't tell you. The drug use, criminal convictions, other than the people with a pocket of weed that got thrown in jail and used as slave labor. She loved doing that. But up and down the line, do you disagree with what Gavin Newsom has done in California on this? Do you disagree with what Jerry Brown did in California on that? What is it about California you think needs fixing? And she'll say nothing. She thinks California is the utopia, and she's ready to bring all of those liberal California policies to the White House and nationally. That message doesn't win in a primary process, but now looky here. She's been able to get the nomination without having to get her hands dirty in that process. Now, people will say Gavin Newsom has a chance of winning like that, and he represents all those policies too. Maybe, but believe it or not, he's much more likable than this cackling fool. He might be able to slickly lie better than anybody else, and he'd still be able to fool voters. But ultimately, I don't think so. As long as California is the disaster that it is, for the first time in American history, more people are leaving California than going to it. And I speak as someone who lived in California the majority of my life. That's just the reality of what's going on there. And this ad is so effective because it reminds everybody this is who she is. She had a voting record to the left of Bernie Sanders. She wanted to do away with private health care. She wanted to abolish ICE. She thinks that policing doesn't make us safe. She wants to allow convicted felons, including terrorists, murderers, and rapists, vote in elections. This is Kamala Harris. So I just want you to understand what I just did there. I laid out on policy why she's wrong. Not to mention the first ad that you saw from Trump, where we laid out on the Biden administration's track record how she's wrong. So it's very clear that the perfect and most effective attack on Kamala Harris has to do with her terrible policies as vice president and her terrible policies as a California Democrat, as an attorney general, and then as a U.S. senator from that state. I tell you that in advance because we are now being told that attacks on Kamala Harris are racist and sexist. Here's Morning Joe this morning.
Kamala Harris, who is accomplished, who is a Black woman, and I think they're going to bump into walls, let's just put it that way, along the way as they try and run against her. The Republicans, the right-wing media, I was watching some yesterday, making fun of her voice. I mean, we're talking middle school stuff. And it's not a good look. I don't know how people respond to this, but they seem to be grasping, and that is actually what this change has created in terms of a dynamic now of a race between Donald J. Trump and Kamala Harris. It's complicated.
You know, I guess in not quite knowing what the line of attack should be, the Republicans in 2024, their first instinct is just to be racist and sexist. I guess that's
Right.
like a tick that they've developed at this point. You know, the problem for...
Can I just jump in here for a minute? Because it's pretty amazing. Mara Gay, she's the one who thought that Michael Bloomberg could just buy all of the votes. You remember when she had a math problem there on MSNBC? Before Mara Gay for the New York Times and Mika Brzezinski for MSNBC calls Republicans racist, as you just heard from Ms. Gay, don't you think that it's incumbent on them to give one example of a racist attack on Kamala Harris? Did you notice that? The only thing I heard was making fun of her voice, which, sorry, it's kind of fair game. And by the way, these are liberal Democrats on MSNBC who can't go a day without calling Donald Trump an orange man, or making fun of his girth, or making fun of his hair. And listen, even Donald Trump makes fun of his hair in brilliant fashion. That's what you do. You go after somebody for their policies, but you also remind voters, especially when it comes to voting for president, that you got to live with this person for the next 4 years. Let me tell you something. Hillary Clinton's laugh, her demeanor, her persona, that was a major, major obstacle that they had to overcome because she's just an unlikable human being. So is Kamala Harris. That's not racist. That's not sexist. They're just odious individuals, and they emit that odious nature right through the camera lens into your living room. That's a big deal. And they've been making this case. I mean, God, they made it against Richard Nixon back in 1960. Who would you rather have a beer with? Tricky Dick or John F. Kennedy, right? That's normal. But here's Mara Gay saying that Republicans are just naturally, instinctively racist without ever giving one example of what they've done or said over the last 48 hours about Kamala Harris that's racist. And her race is the least of the concerns about her. I haven't heard anything having to do with her race. I have heard things about her laugh and her voice, but that's not because she's a woman. It's because she's a lunatic or comes across as a lunatic. All right, let's get into it.
J.D. Vance and for the Trump campaign is that any voter who is going to be responding to that by voting for them was probably not going to vote for the Democrats anyway. So what they're actually doing is they are motivating every Democratic voter, every fence sitter, every independent voter And people who just are disgusted by racism and sexism and want to see a multiracial democracy continue to the polls. You know, when the AKAs hear that, they're going to march in formation to the poll. So that's the contribution that JD Vance is making. I mean, saying you should be grateful for this country, it's just all that is a dog whistle calling her uppity. Every Black voter in America knows that. So this is really not helping his case, but I guess that's just their go-to line. If when all else fails, just try racism.
Oh, there's the example. So JD Vance saying that Kamala Harris is full of criticism for this country and she should be grateful for this country. That's a dog whistle of racism. A dog whistle. Oh, I do love the dog whistles. You know what a dog whistle is? A dog whistle is a normal criticism that anyone would make in everyday life that someone on the left wants to assign racism to. And so therefore it becomes a dog whistle. It's a beautiful thing when you're on the left and you're intelligent and you get to sit on set on MSNBC with the New York Times logo behind you and just call whatever you want a dog whistle. So saying Kamala Harris should actually show gratitude that we live in the United States of America, that's a dog whistle, which is kind of rich considering Kamala Harris's ancestry out of Jamaica were literally slave owners. I mean, of the two people you see on your screen right now, only one of them has a direct link in legacy to slave ownership. And it's the Democrat, naturally. But then there's the sexism of making fun of her laugh, which I really, really love. Let's watch.
She's also going to be attacked on whether or not she earned the job that she has.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, hang on. This isn't about the laugh. This is about her political origin story. This is about what she did to get ahead in politics back in the halcyon days of the 90s in San Francisco when she was a protege of the very powerful mayor of San Francisco, formerly the majority leader in the assembly in Sacramento, Willie Brown. He had the biggest Democratic political machine in all of the state of California, and he took a liking to young Kamala, saw a lot of potential in her. And she rose to the occasion and delivered. And we're not allowed to point this out.
She's also going to be attacked on whether or not she earned the job that she has and is prepared to get the job that she's campaigning for. We've already seen those attacks. The New York Post called her the DEI president. We have already also seen attacks on her gender. If you listen to the way some are talking in some of the social media that's talked about the way she laughs, the way she dresses. You know, I've seen that before and up close working for Hillary Clinton. So these racialized and gendered attacks are coming and have already started.
Okay, he's brilliant. Let's just cut through the bowl here, okay? Her laugh is obnoxious. It's undeniably true. And it's grating. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard. It's like styrofoam being rubbed together. It's like having a nail pounded into your brain while you already had a migraine. And no, the American people do not want to live with 4 years of that. And reminding them of that is not actually below the belt, I assure you, number one. Number two, it's not sexist either. Number two, about her political origin story. As I just mentioned, let's just get to the blunt truth of it. She slept her way into politics in the Democratic Party in San Francisco. She just did. She gave Willie Brown exactly what he was looking for as a 60-year-old married man. She was 29 years old, and he got something out of the deal, and she certainly got something out of the deal. And when the New York Post refers to her as a DEI president, let's be clear what that means. Joe Biden, in picking Kamala Harris, specifically said, even before naming her, that he would choose a Black woman. Now, when you go out of your way for diversity's sake and inclusion for inclusion's sake, that is the definition of DEI. She benefited from that ethic. She benefited from that perspective, from that agenda. It was demanded on Joe Biden that he pick a black woman. He said, "You betcha I'll pick a black woman." Oh, really? Who? I have no idea, but I know it's going to be a black woman. And then lo and behold, she's the one who gets it, even though she never got a vote and she was unpopular and people didn't like her and she was a political failure on the national level, but she got it. So when you get something that you didn't earn, that's the E part of DEI. She is literally a DEI pick, and now she wants to be your DEI president. All right. Now, about that true, factual sexual escapade that led to Kamala Harris's political career, I want you to know that the Associated Press is on the job. Everything that I just told you about her relationship with Willie Brown and how she delivered what Willie wanted and how Willie then delivered what she needed to advance her political career, it's been fact-checked by the Associated Press. And their fact check is chef's kiss. Just, I want to hang it in a gallery. Take a look at this. Claim Harris got her start by having an affair with a married man, California politician Willie Brown. Now the facts. This is missing some important context. Brown was separated from his wife during the relationship, and it wasn't secret. In other words, yeah, 100% true. Absolutely accurate. And Megyn Kelly yesterday sort of stood up for herself for making such criticisms of Kamala Harris and pushed back on the idea that this is in some way sexist or inappropriate to point out.
About on this on Twitter right now about whether her sleeping with Willie Brown when she was an up-and-coming aspiring politician in San Francisco is fair game. It's part of a pattern of her ascending to positions that she does not deserve based on merit for other reasons. First, she slept with this guy, Willie Brown, who was this extremely popular, powerful congressman out in California, in the assembly out there, went on to become the speaker out there. And he put her in two different positions that she did not deserve when she was only 29 or 30. He was 60. Already that affair is sus. And she was making the equivalent of 130 grand a year by today's money for meeting twice a month for these medical boards and another position for which she had zero qualifications. He was trying to lay the road for her political career. He admitted that he's the one who helped her win the role as DA, and she was sleeping with him. I'm sorry, it's fair game.
Just one quick correction to Megyn Kelly. I'm pretty sure when all is said and done, Willie Brown put Kamala Harris in way more than just two positions. I could be wrong, but the affair lasted for quite some time. And two positions, that's not nearly enough for Willie Brown to get the job done on a regular basis. But we do know that Kamala Harris definitely got the job done. What a time this is going to be. I'm glad we're in this together. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next time. My name's Larry O'Connor. I'm fired, aren't I? Am I fired? I'm not. Oh, all right. Then we will be back next time. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.